O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. When I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him? For by him were all things created that are in heaven and in earth, visible and invisible. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. Therefore you are my witness, saith the Lord, that I am God.
Shalom. Hello again, and we're back with our evidence of God. We're getting more evidence every week. We're going to talk again with Gerald Schroeder and other Israeli scientists and with Fred Haran. And this time we're going to discuss this explosion of life we find in both Genesis 1 and in the scientific record, the Cambrian explosion. This really does suggest a creator. Evolution doesn't cause explosions. Evolution is terribly slow. If you buy into the theory, it's mutations very slowly affecting other mutations and so on. But that isn't how things happen, either scientifically or scripturally. We're also going to talk with David Teltsur, an Israeli expert on evolution and creation. Not a Jerusalem. Well, Gerald, now back with, we're going through the days one by one, and your chart is here showing their 24-hour days, also showing they took a very long time in terms of the expansion of the universe. And we went down to the bottom there and we divided the expansion of the universe, the 1 million squared, into 15 billion years, found it equaled 6 days. I'm saying that quickly, I realize, but if you get this whole series on the video and study this out, it's really worth it. Or Gerald's book, The Science of God, will explain and make all of this clear. But now we come to some very exciting parts. Day 5, day 6. Tell us about that.
We finished up day 4 last time and put a check on here that the atmosphere became clear, and now...
The Bible was right again.
Again, I just... it's telling us something.
Or science was right again.
Science was right. I had the program, Science is right again. Day 5 is extraordinary. Day 5 is like the test of the validity of these 6 days of creation. The Hebrew text reads, V'yomer Elokim yeshritzu mayim sheretz nefesh chaya. This is the first mention of animal life in the 6 days of Genesis. So the Bible goes out on a limb here and says, day number 5, the first animals.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeshritzu mayim, that the waters swarm with life. It's an explosion of life.
Not a little bit. It's all sudden...
Right. And it's in the waters. So the Bible says the following. We've got the first animals. It's an explosion of life, not a gradual explosion of life, and the life is in the waters. Yeah. So the Bible really makes 4 claims. The first animals appear sometime during day 5, which begins 750 million years ago, remember adding up the duration, and ends about 250 million years ago.
Okay.
And that the animals appear an explosion in the water. I dwell on this because this is one of the... There have been 3 major revolutions in science that have brought science hand in glove with the Bible. First, there was a beginning. You recall it wasn't so many decades ago that scientists said, beginning, don't be silly, the universe is eternal. No one says that any longer. We had a beginning. The opening word of the Bible is true. Then the claim was that, well, life at least took gazillions of years to evolve gradually. No. Water appears on the earth, life appears on the earth at the same time.
Swarms.
Well, this is the plant life, just there. And then finally, on day 5, we're told about the animals exploding in the waters.
Yeah.
Scientific American, November 1992. There are many, many articles of this, but Scientific American, November 92. The Big Bang of animal evolution. When I get these, I get so excited, I mark them all up, I can't have it. But, and here are the animals.
Oh, boy.
See where they are, Zola? In the waters.
Yeah, in the waters.
The Big Bang of animal evolution. I want to read the summary of the article because the summary is extraordinary. Scientific American is the most widely read science journal in the world, okay? It prints a 3-line summary of each article.
Oh, uh-huh.
Here's the summary of the Big Bang of animal evolution. I just show this to make sure I'm not putting any monkey business. I use the term.
Okay.
About 600 million years ago. Well, what do you know about that? Right smack dab in day 5.
Check mark for the Bible.
Check mark for, I like to do that in red so it stands out. Check 1 for the Bible. A remarkable burst of evolutionary, you got to get the word in there, you know, evolution. A remarkable burst of evolutionary creativity simultaneously. Zola, you see that word? Simultaneously. I didn't learn it simultaneously in school. I learned first came this and then came...
Yeah, the latter.
Simultaneously gave rise to the basic body plans of all modern multicellular animals. So we have the first animals, a remarkable burst and explosion of life, and it was all in the waters. And the timing, give us 4 checks on that one. It can't do better than that.
No.
An explosion of life.
Either Scientific American is right or the Bible's right.
No, in fact,
they're
or maybe
both
they're
right.
both right at this stage. That an explosion of life. And the amazing fact is the timing is correct. Notice each of these times are correct. So I was given this as a gift. I was giving some talks, not in Israel, but in the States, in fact, in Houston.
Yes.
And I guess, I don't know if I mentioned the man's name, you know, he made 1,000 letters asking for more. In any event, he said he's so excited by this theory. He said, my son has 2 fossils from the Cambrian explosion. It's called the Cambrian explosion because the first of the fossils were discovered in Cambridge, England, and hence the Cambrian. And I said, I want to give you one of my son's 2 fossils. Well, you can imagine what the son said. Daddy, understand, this is a fossil that dates back right to here, 500 to 600 million years ago. It's called a trilobite. It's the first of the insects because what appears in this explosion of life, according to Scientific American, is animals with gills, jointed limbs, intestines, claws, mouths, and most amazingly of all, eyes. Now, we've had this on your show once before,
Yes.
a while ago. Darwin always said, in fact, he says it exactly. I can why paraphrase it when I can read it. Right.
We're
from Darwin.
hearing a science
Yeah.
lecture in the background. This is
Here.
a busy museum, so
Yeah,
I just wanted to...
This is a science museum, and science gets done.
It never stops.
Darwin, from the Origin of Species, Chapter 6. Can we believe that natural selection could produce an organ so wonderful as an eye? This is Charles Darwin. Darwin, my friend, it was a non-starter of a problem. The trilobite appears from nowhere in the fossil record, having an eye, and the perfect fossils, this is not a perfect fossil, obviously, the perfect ones in museums, had eyes that were optically perfect. There are probably a dozen, probably 100, maybe 1,000 school children in your audience right now. Let's say he was an insect. That means it had must have had many, many lenses, right? You're right, kids. It had many, many lenses.
Really? And that's right from the beginning, spontaneous.
If you look at this in the fossil record, you have this, and you go deeper, deeper, older in the fossil record. They used to say, well, there were no fossils before, we just haven't found them. The fossil record is complete or full from here back to the 3 billion years to the forming of life. There are fossils. They're all simple, one-celled fossils or globular structures that show no differentiation other than like a sponge might be.
Yes.
And then right above that, in the fossil record, comes among many, I have only this one example, the trilobite. Sectioned body, already, what is it, like 2 or 3 inches long, jointed limbs, the perfect ones had jointed limbs, optically perfect eyes. Zola, where did it come from?
Well, it didn't evolve, did it?
It didn't evolve, and you know what? Here's one right here. In fact, here's one of my trilobites right here. See the eye?
Oh, yeah.
Jointed limbs?
Yeah. I'd hate to, like I said before, get up at night and find it on my kitchen floor. That's
Well, that's why we have a wife. You send Sandra. She clears the way. In fact, Darwin understood it. Origin of Species, Chapter 6, difficulties in the theory. See, he knew it. Darwin knew there were real problems. Absence or rarity of transitional varieties. In other words, you get a life form, and bingo, it appears fully formed. And then it goes further in another one. But he claims natura non facit saltum. Nature cannot make jumps. But he acknowledges that the fossil record is full of jumps. So what did Darwin say? Well, this is 1859. In the next 50, 100 years, many more fossils will be found, and the fossil record will be filled in. Oh, it has been filled in with jumps.
Yes.
The punctuated with this explosion of life, and then explosion of this life, and this form. That's the fossil record. You know, as a scientist, I can find there is no simple way.
It argues for creation, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's just amazing. But when we quote Gould we quote Charles Darwin at the closing of The Origin of Species. This is the closing page. This is many books in here. Yeah. The Origin of Species. The final sentences. When Gould quotes it, he quotes it in two publications, so he can't deny. I'm going to read how Stephen Jay Gould, professor of biology at Harvard University, and how his students learned it also. There's a grandeur in this view of life that while this planet has gone on cycling according to the fixed laws of gravity, from a simple beginning, wonderful and beautiful life has evolved. That's Gould on Darwin.
Yeah.
Here's Darwin on Darwin. There is a grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having originally been breathed by the Creator into a few forms or one. And while this world has gone on, things have evolved.
You mean that Gould left out Darwin's remark about the Creator?
About the Creator. Yeah, it's really outrageous.
Well, it's called quoting out of context. It's called lying, isn't it? I mean,
Gould elsewhere says that Darwin is his model, is his hero,
yeah.
And yet he won't quote that phrase.
I've had trouble with a few professors lately. I didn't know it went all the way to Harvard, but
So anyway, we see day number 5 has 4 checks. The first animals appear, the explosion of life, the waters, and then we can just jump into day number 5, day number 6, the last of the days, just to
wrap that up for us.
Wrap it up in this session. That it says on day number 6, it says that the V'yomer Elokim Totzia Aretz Nefesh Chaya, that the land animals, that God says, let the earth bring forth land animals.
Yes.
Okay? Now, what's interesting here is that between day 5 and day 6, or about 250 million years ago, according to the fossil record, there is a decimation of life, tenfold destruction, so that 90% of all life disappears from the fossil record. Complete destruction, we don't know what did it. And then the land is repopulated with animals. Score again for the Bible.
Okay.
Zola, as we went through here day by day, I hope you and some of your listeners feel the excitement that I have, because when you struggle with this as science, I'm an MIT trained scientist, you understand? I have a bachelor's, master's, doctorate degree. There's a lot of science that I'd like it to all be science. But the fact of the matter is, when you pick up scriptures, and you look into the deeper meaning, and you get into those scriptures, much of the meaning, the deeper meaning of the Hebrew, you find that in fact the Bible hasn't changed, but science has moved as you move your hand to fit into a glove. And that's what's happened. And that's what I hope we've seen in these programs.
How wonderful, Gerald. Well, in these few programs, you've taken us from the, the Big Bang, from the very beginning, all the way out to the creation of man, which would be the next step. And I really thank you. It's enlightening. Yes, we feel your excitement, I would say so. And yes, a fully credentialed scientist can believe the scriptures, believe in the Creator, and even show where other scientists are trying to avoid the Creator. Gerald, thanks so much for the teaching.
Thank you so much, Zola, for having me. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast.
You know, such a phenomenon as this explosion of life that happened just speaks of a creator. Evolution is a long, slow progression of mutations leading slowly, leisurely from one species to another and so on. But this was, everything happened suddenly and at once, as if purposely caused. That fits the biblical record and, of course, fits Dr. Schroeder's computations. You know, even Darwin referred to a creator. He saw things as being created. He's not quoted accurately. He's quoted as if he were anti-God, but that is not Charles Darwin. He inferred from what he saw, creator made it. I interviewed a fascinating biologist in Israel, a biology teacher who is a messianic believer over there and has his problems with creation versus evolution.
I cannot teach them about my faith, but I can tell them about God, because immediately they ask, so if you don't accept evolution, if you don't believe this, so do you believe in Creator? Do you believe in God? I said, what a question. Of course I believe in God.
David, so you are a scientist, you are a teacher, and you are a believer in the Messiah. So in your three roles then, I want to ask you about evolution. Because you teach biology, this is you have a doctorate in biology.
Yes, PhD in biology.
Yeah. So you know something about evolution, and you run into it in your work, and you run into it as a
believer. I grew
believer.
up on evolution.
Okay, let's start as a scientist. Tell me about your history with evolution.
As I've said, I grew up in a kibbutz. I grew up on this philosophy. So since I was a baby, I've heard about evolution. But when I started my studies in university, I already came as a believer in Yeshua HaMashiach. So it was very clear for me that I can't put them together. I cannot link them together and live with them together. Really, I saw it, and I still see it as an enemy of God, enemy to the Bible. Sometimes I have to hear things like, listen, David, if you won't stop this, we have to think about your career.
Uh-huh.
Or where is the democracy? I asked. They said, we hope you understand. But I never could accept this theory. For me, it is a religion. I'm a scientist, and I can still do my research, and I'm a teacher for biology, and I teach biology. And they cannot stop me. You know why? Because even if I take the word evolution from all the books, all the scientific papers, articles, remove the word evolution, it won't change anything, believe me. And I made this experiment many times, and I showed it to many, many scientists and people.
Well, now, you're a high school teacher now, and a prize-winning high school teacher, I understand. You were given an award, it was in the papers, you didn't even know about it, as a skillful teacher. But still, you, as a biology teacher, you're something unusual, because you will not teach evolution.
I'll make it more correct. I'm not teaching evolution at school, at high school, only at high school. And I have the privilege not to teach it. Why? Because today there is a program of the Ministry of Education.
Yeah.
And they give us a program how to teach the subject, what subjects. And the pupils themselves, the students, they can choose that subject. And there's one subject separate from the others. And they can decide if they want to choose it or not. Evolution, Darwin. And I tell them, don't take this subject. This is stupid, this is nonsense. This is a religion, and I'm not going to teach you this. And you know, from all over the country, only 1% of the pupils of the schools, they choose to study this subject. Now, I cannot teach them about my faith, but I can tell them about God, because immediately they ask, so if you don't accept evolution, if you don't believe this, so do you believe in Creator? Do you believe in God? I said, what a question. Of course I believe in God.
Yes. Yeah.
Give me a better explanation. Give me something that can explain me this complexity, this perfection.
Yeah.
Look to the cell, look to the eye. Look to this planet Earth with an envelope of the ozone around. No other planet. Look to the meaning of life itself. What is this? One molecule, of water. Look to the structure. Do you believe it could come just by chance?
Yeah.
Take 10 balls with different colors and throw them through the wall. What is the chance that they'll stand one behind the other one, every time with the same colors, the same order? What is the chance?
Yeah.
They said, impossible, nothing, zero. I said, and when we are talking about one protein in our body, built by few thousand molecules of amino acids. What is the chance there? There is no chance, they say. And you know, the pupils, for them it is very clear.
Well, men in Israel are seeking God and finding Him, the scientists are. And here, too, the same thing. Fred Harron, our guest now, wrote the book Show Me God, another attempt of men that says what the message from space is telling us about God. Fred, there was a time Job directly went at God out of the whirlwind, or God answered him out of the whirlwind anyway, said, "Where wast thou when I laid the cornerstone of the earth?" I remember Will Durant's Story of Civilization. He comments, Job got everything back from God but an answer to his questions. Are we now getting some answers?
Well, it all does relate back to human beings. Somehow all this creation, this fine-tuning we've been talking about, this evidence of design, raises the question naturally, what is it fine-tuned for? If the cosmologists can't help but to use words like purpose and intention. Well, what's the purpose of all this? And they talk about the anthropic principle, which is anthros, man. It's all done somehow, it appears to be done for man's benefit, or for the benefit of life at least. So why would, it comes down to a philosophical question, why would the God who created all of this do so with such fine-tuning, such purpose? What would his purpose be in creating people who then mess it up? I mean, you look up to the heavens and you see beauty, you see perfection. You look down to earth and we turn on our televisions and we lock our doors at night and we see something very far from perfection. What went wrong is a question. And of course the Bible gives us answers. Cosmology can lead us just so far, but it does lead us far enough to make us really wonder, what was God thinking when he created people, these free-willed beings, when he could have had moral perfection in his universe? Instead he made people who could mess it up, who could, and the answer has to have something to do with, I believe, and what I've looked at over the years, and scientists should see this too, with the idea of why would you have a free will being? The only real good reason, it would mess things up, the only good reason could be if you wanted to have a relationship, because you have to have a free-willed being to have a real relationship.
Sure. It's, one guy put it, our senior theologian, Dr. Tom McCall, said to me, asked him one day why God made this whole creation. He said, being omnipotent and omniscient doesn't get you love.
Yeah.
He was lonesome, he said.
Yeah, I don't know. Like you say, only God knows for sure whether God was lonesome or whatever. Maybe just for our benefit, create a being so we could benefit with a relationship with him. It works certainly both ways. God wants us to be able to glorify him. We receive meaning and purpose in life only when we are in relationship with him.
And we have children, and we want our children to love us out of free will. We don't want to command them to love us.
Right, right. Even the moral philosophers who aren't Christians, as Lawrence Kohlberg comes up with 3 different kinds of relationships that are possible. There's a slave-master type relationship, manipulative. You don't even need a free will being at all for that. You can do that with a robot. Rapist victim would be another example of that. There's the idea of a relationship that is what you do this for me, I'll do that for you. Contractual relationship, employer-employee. And then the highest form of relationship is the relationship which is love, which is mutual fellowship, where you do something for someone, you're even willing to sacrifice your will for their will. It's a matter of 2 persons, free will persons, giving themselves to the other. And that's what we have as the highest form of relationship that we can know about. And wouldn't it make sense that the highest being in the universe would want to have the highest kind of relationship with us? I know so many people who are brought up in different church traditions, and they somehow come out with this idea that having a relationship with God is like the relationship we have with the Internal Revenue Service. And just follow the rules, stay as far away as possible, watch your P's and Q's. How different picture we get from the Bible, where we have this God of compassion who wants to have a real loving relationship with us.
Most of the people in the world are not in touch with the creating God who made us. How is that?
I think it's the same thing that puts them out of touch with reality. People go crazy over it. You think of, if we expect, as for me as a parent, 5 kids, and we are just appalled when we see other parents who don't show compassion for their children, a woman who drives her car into the lake and watches them drown with no compassion, that makes the news, it's newsworthy. How much more should we expect compassion from the parent of us all, that he would, and if you look all through history, as I've done in my past, all through comparative religions and ask yourself, where do we see any evidence of God's compassion? Your eyes inevitably come down to that page in history where Jesus Christ makes his appearance. That's where the bells and whistles go off and you say, there, that's where we have evidence of the compassionate God.
God became a man and came here to talk to us.
And that to me is the greatest purpose in life.
Yeah. Fred, I really appreciate your coming to our program and commenting on all these programs. This will be the last of the regular series, but next week Fred will comment for the whole half hour on all that we have covered, and that should be very interesting. He's the author of Show Me God. He is a science writer and commentator, and he's an American. And it's very nice that we have scientists who are believers as well. What Job did say to God, what God said to Job that day, he said, "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and the thick darkness a swaddling band for it, and brake it up from my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, Hitherto shall thou come, but no further, and hither shall thy proud waves be stayed." He asks Job. Job does not answer. That kind of established who was God and who was Job. Nevertheless, it was a loving relationship. Job had everything restored, as we said. These things are so wonderful out of the Bible that it's such a pleasure to do a series like this. This is the last of the regular programs where we're going to present all this talent to you, but the search for God in science goes on, and in this century, as Fred has pointed out, we've made some real progress.